Hi there, from Custom Home Builder Solutions, also known as CHS, a job costing, full accounting, and profit management software for the professional home builder. In this video, we are going to talk about how if you like to withhold retainage from any of usually your trades, etc., when you're paying them, how to handle that, and how you do it when you're selecting bills to pay, how it comes into play. So first of all, this is a little bit of a continuation too in a little series about selecting unpaid bills to pay for a check run. So I'm going to show you first on the vendors list. We've set up one of our vendors, a subcontractor, to withhold retainage from, but I wanted you to see his setup window. So I'm going to click the edit button so we can see how this vendor was set up and take a look at the retainage area. If you'll notice over here, there's a place where it asks if you want to withhold retainage from this particular vendor. And it's over here. There's a thing that says retainage question mark, and if you check mark it, that means yes, we want to hold with retainage. And there's a place to enter the retainage percent that you normally would like to withhold from them when you're paying them. And there's a little question mark button here that explains this to you. So now I'd like to show you what happens when a vendor is marked for withholding retainage when you're selecting bills to pay. When you're posting the bills, it's not going to say anything about that, but when you're selecting bills to pay, and let's go ahead and open the great big database. We've been in the past two videos about selecting bills to pay and check marking them to pay and the various ways you can check mark them to pay to be in a check run. But the place that it will ask you if you want to withhold retainage is if you select mark this on its own as an individual selecting. By check marking, it does trigger that up. Notice if you click the select groups to pay, and I've mentioned before, please read all the information here. It says that in the help that this will not unselect bills already to pay, but to withhold retainage, select to pay one at a time on previous windows. So if you're involved in doing retainages, you might need to be aware of that and know that when CHS will trigger up deducting retainage is when you check mark that one to pay. So let's see what happens when I check mark it to pay. Right away, it detected that this vendor is marked for deducting retainage on the vendor setup window. Do you want to deduct retainage? And if I click yes, deduct retainage, another window will open, and it will let me select if for some reason I'm wanting to hold retainage entries in a different GL account. I can select a different one, but it will supply the GL account, if you look here on this record, that this record was posted to. And that's because really retainage entries, CHS is going to create two of them. It's going to create a negative one, a negative entry to include as a deduction from the current invoice, and it will also create a positive retainage entry to pay later. So the amount will go in and out of the GL account selected, causing a zero effect. It will also go in and out of the same cost code that was applied to this record and the same job. So it just doesn't really, overall for accounting or job cost reports, doesn't affect the amount. It's an in and out so we can handle deducting retainages and then keeping that retainage as a retainage entry to pay later. So I'm going to leave the 10% dropped in because of the vendor setup window. I'm going to leave those alone, but I could change them if there's some reason I want to right there. And I'm going to tell CHS to post the retainage entries. It says they've been posted, so CHS jumped out to the server and made these two other records for you. And because I check marked the first one, it's going to have the one for deduction check marked as to pay. See how the first one here, $13.50, that I check marked, and then it triggered that retainage pop-up. Then CHS created a minus entry. Notice it's to the same job, same cost code, and that $14.30 for 10%, and it check marked it too. So that if we did a check run right now, this check would actually be $1,350 minus $135 for how much would be paid to Acosta today. And then after we paid those, just this $135 would be left. It says retainage and that's the amount that would be left to pay in some other check run, which is usually a later time. Now what I'd like to show you, I think, besides Acosta, we had some down here for JT wallpaper. And you can see where some retainage deduction and retainage. This would have been, I think we've unchecked things in all of our previous videos. I said no there because I can see I've already deducted retainage, and I might have that check marked. And I'd say no, but I want this one and this one and this one. If it's a minus amount, it won't pop up either. But I just was, and so we would be left with $751.10 and $104.75 to pay some other time. But if later on you come in, we can imagine that maybe we went and printed these checks. That's going to be in my next videos about printing checks, so I'm not doing that right now. But let's pretend we had kind of printed those checks, and we want to come in and search just for ones that have been held retainage later to pay, and we want to just check mark those to pay. You first of all would probably want, if you were doing a retainage run, you'd probably want to just unselect all of them. If for some reason you have a policy of you're going to just print all these retainage checks at one time, you'd want to make sure no other invoices were selected to pay, so I just did that, like unselect all, which doesn't make any sense because this would have been paid already. But anyway, so we don't have any check mark to pay. So what you could do to search for just the retainage, positive retainage amount, is what I'm going to show you here, so that you could quickly just try to check mark those. So I'm going to search. And notice here in description, if I type retainage, it did say, if I get out of there, it says can do partial. That means it's going to find anything with the word retainage found in the description field. Now we're really only wanting this one that's just retainage by itself, but by just leaving this search like this, we would also get one saying retainage deduction. Retainage deductions will always be a minus amount. So what you can do to just get your retainage entries that are positive amounts that you're getting ready to pay is that you, right here in the amount field, the symbol like this, the caret going that way, that's above your period, usually on your keyboard, this means greater than, and I'm going to say greater than 0. I only want entries that have the word retainage in them, and entries greater than 0 as far as their amount, so I won't get these minus ones over here. So I'll do a search, and that way all I've found is the ones that had retainage in them and positive amounts. We saw how these were. So whatever day you're sitting down and deciding you're paying all these retainage checks, that type of search might help you, because then I could go through and check mark these to pay. It will also detect that this is a retainage entry. It won't jump up and ask if you want to deduct retainage. So then you would print your checks. You would just have 2 checks, one to JTS wallpaper and Acosta framing, that would end up printing. And you can tell by the invoice number that does show on the check stubs that it is for retainage, as best as it can be with a job code, etc. So that's just my tip for if you're deciding, that you are withholding retainage and then later you're paying all your retainage checks. You might be paying all your retainage checks just for one job, so you could have also just asked for a job in your search too, and then check mark those. But like I said, it's a good idea to unselect everything and then just be doing your retainage checks that you're paying. I do know some builders that do that at a certain time or near later in the job or end of a stage or something. They'll cut all checks for all the retainage they may have withheld during that stage, that kind of thing. So anyway, that's about how retainage is handled, and CHS gives you a way to do it if you do withhold retainage. I think there's a lot of builders who don't do that anymore, but there still are some, so that feature is there for you. And we will begin starting on our videos about how to actually print checks, or to simply mark something that's here in the unpaid accounts payable list as paid, either by a manual check or maybe by a credit card. And thank you for watching.